I suppose it's time for my real first log. At least now that I've got that introductory message for the Ethics Committee and Satellite Departments completed and handed in. Although I suppose I'm more of a Satellite Department than they are. I don't know. These are really only for me, since there's no way this would ever be sanctioned by the Information Review Board, at least not without being redacted to hell and back, which kind of defeats the purpose of a personal log. I guess the point is there's going to be an extremely select group of people who could get access to these recordings. The list I've created in my mind involves a couple scenarios. I can see myself passing these on to my successor so that they have a better, or at least more personalized look at the goings-on of the department they're inheriting. I can also see myself giving these logs to my staff, if I ever get any staff, in order to pass on information or let them know something. I'm not quite sure what the context of me passing on a series of personal logs would be, but as soon as I spend a minute thinking about it, which I've been doing a bit the past few days, it makes more and more sense to have the option to pass down information than to not have that option. The last thing that I can see happening is that something bad would happen to me, which would suck. But in that scenario, I think these logs would most likely prove incredibly beneficial to an investigation team or an assessment committee. So without further ado, this recording marks the first data log entry of lead researcher and division head of the ADA 11 Anomalous Acoustics Division. For future reference to this branch, I will use the acronym AAD for the sake of brevity. I think it would be useful to document the role of this division right now at its inception, in case it changes somewhere down the line. That way I, or whoever listens to these, has a timeline of how the division changed its native department parameters. The AAD project started in order to investigate the ability of sonic devices and processes, both natural and anomalous, to affect the world in a controlled manner. The advancements made by ADA 11 AAD are to be immediately applied to site and staff protocol for the purposes of tooled experimentation, versatility, and psychophysiological safety, with applications focused primarily on ranked research staff and combat personnel, but not excluding D-class individuals and internally contained D-class groups. That's just me reading from my own briefs and abstracts for the project. If those change down the line, this is where it was at the beginning, but you should refer to whatever they're like at the time of listening. I'm assuming a number or maybe even a majority of ensuing logs will detail environmental experiments, devices, anomalous objects, and phenomena used or experimented on during AAD processing, as well as changes in protocol output, experimental and redundant procedures, and intended or applied non- and pro-logistical outlines for staff and site personnel. This will also be useful to me in case I need to cross-reference my logs for information and empirical evidence to support requests for department changes and division projects that require an abstract to be submitted for review by either site administration or the ethics board committees, or both. Hopefully that covers any information that's needed for a timeline or an introduction. Now I can move on to, I guess, the meat. I've already decided that I'm going to talk about my first project on the docket. Technically, I don't have a site I'm officially attached to. However, I am personally assigned to Site 55, and since the AAD came out primarily as a result of my personal research, its temporary home is Site 55, which is fine with me. I like it here. Good staff, good work. The fish smell is my only complaint. That being said, I've been made aware that if I stick with the program and it continues, it will most likely involve a good deal of traveling to other sites, as well as any active anomalous zones and areas of interest that pertain to the research. For now, though, most of my work is related to the research going on here at 55. Now then, the most recent project. I should start with some context. The power grid at Site 55 needs to be separate from the city's power grid. No site can risk the possibility of an outage causing disruptions in containment or ongoing research. However, Site 55's proximity to Wonder World causes a number of anomalous effects on the area and surrounding environs. At this point, I think it would be most beneficial to read verbatim the internet file on Wonderworld, since I would rather not leave out any gaps in information, and the existing file is relatively comprehensive. So here we go. Let me pull it up. There we go. Location of interest, Wonderworld. Group of interest number, 386. Also known as WW, The Workshop, Wonka's, Kittyland, etc. Threat level, orange. Assigned Task Force MTF Alpha 98, the Focus Testers. Location description. Wonderworld is a vast spatial anomaly containing a city of the same name. Various industrial parks, research facilities, housing developments, schools, a university, and the headquarters of Dr. Wondertainment. The demographics of Wonderworld are largely unknown. The current population is estimated at around 15,000, circa 2014. Various testimonies, as well as evidence from captured subjects, suggest the anomalous properties of the area alter the appearance of its human residents over time. A baseline human will, over the course of their life, experience minor changes such as the pigment of the hair, skin, or eyes into non-natural colors, amplification in the size of the eyes, etc. These alterations appear to amplify over generations and will become more extreme, including mutations such as the growth of additional limbs, elongation of the neck, prehensile tails, etc. The culture of Wonderworld revolves around the concept of wonder-making, the belief that one's goal in life is to seek fulfillment in, quote, making the world a wonderful place, unquote. Though its calendar system overlapped with major commercial holidays such as Black Friday, Christmas, Boxing Day, etc., and displays many similarities to the Gregorian system, the Wonder calendar observes years in wonder years. The founding of the Dr. Wondertainment Company is considered year zero in this system. Typical education curriculums involve the history of the Wondertainment brand and its lines of products, economics, marketing, art history, thaumatology, psionics, craftsmanship, and studies of the mundane. Though most citizens complete several years of internships and work studies before being hired by the Dr. Wondertainment Company, employment is not compulsory. The Foundation has been aware of the existence of Wonderworld since 1935, but were not able to reliably investigate the location until 2006. And document. My own research started as a byproduct of Wonderworld, geared towards its effects on the people growing up surrounded by its influence. I myself was one such person, having grown up in the area around Wonderworld. Unfortunately, the only way I'm aware of this is by accessing my own notes and research from this earlier period. Oh, shoot, I should explain that. Okay, in case someone needs to use these logs as like a database. Okay, personnel files state I grew up in Milton, well within Wonderworld's area of influence. For reference, for anyone listening, the reason I need personnel files to know this is that about 2 years ago, an accident caused by the Pataphysical Research Department erased large sections of my past. I have no memory of where I come from, and any family I have seemingly does not exist. All DNA records I have submitted do not trace back to a known source, and I don't have a name. I currently go by my research ID 15145. Certain personnel logs, because of their already anomalous effects, just being in the internet system, have survived, which is how I know about my past and where I grew up. There's other things, but they don't pertain to this project, so if I need to touch on them in the future, I will, but right now they're not that important. In any case, my attunement to any non-standard rules of reality is what started me on the path to discovering and researching how sound can affect our susceptibility to and interaction with anomalous phenomena. I have various theories as to the nature of my own latent reality sensing abilities, but none that I can prove beyond a doubt, and none so severe that the Foundation considers me an active risk beyond just their standard monitoring of quasi-anomalous staff. Now onto the issue with the Site-55 backup generator. In order to avoid the adverse effects of fluctuations in the main city power grid, a massive backup generator is located underneath Site-55. While it is categorized as a backup generator, its function proves to be much more widespread. Power needs have drastically increased over the last 2 decades, and the generator is now in use essentially at all times. Normally, this doesn't pose a problem as the generator's maximum output far exceeds Site 55's current power draw. However, over the last 3 months, the generator's output has been steadily lowering, or was. No mechanical or electrical issues were detected over the course of those 3 months. A group of researchers put forward a hypothesis that the source of the generator's power must be the source of the issue. Now, the source of Site 55's power was less of an issue and the generator performed a solely ancillary function, but now that it serves a much more prominent role, the level of scrutiny has increased tenfold. The backup generator draws power from the energy put out by two parallel dimensions rubbing up against each other. In theory, this functions analogously to tectonic activity, albeit at an anomalous level. The parallel dimension in question is none other than Wonder World. For a time, the researchers assumed that Wonder World was having an active effect on the generator. That is to say, individuals or groups located in Wonder World were actively sabotaging the generator. None of the researchers' findings indicated that there was an issue with the process itself. Therefore, the next logical conclusion was that the generator was receiving energy that had been tainted at the source instead of during transmission or absorption. And this was where I intervened. Due to my close connection with Wonder World, I had a feeling that a direct act of sabotage from Wonder World's upper management was, at the very least, incredibly unlikely. An active sabotage felt far too confrontational for the usual MO of a Wondertainment property, product, or individual. While many Wondertainment entities can prove extremely dangerous, they all follow their own sense of logic, a set of rules that are fundamentally different from the set of rules we take for granted, both in terms of natural law and societal norms. An attack on Site 55 would contradict any known rules that Wondertainment follows. There have been targeted events caused by Wondertainment, but they always come with a mission statement of sorts, while the generator issue was a completely isolated incident. It was at that point that I offered my own hypothesis. The issues with the generator are a result of the clashing of fundamental laws of nature between the two dimensions. Due to the generator drawing power from an interdimensional rift, any discrepancies between dimensions would be exacerbated and compounded, resulting in adverse effects on the generator. I believe that due to the faith-based approach towards quote-unquote wonder-making that the residents of Wonder World take, an equal attempt at a faith-based solution would be necessary. If the residents of Wonder World truly believe that what they are doing is fundamentally necessary to the operation of Wondertainment, then we must believe that the generator is fundamentally necessary to our own operation. This is where some of the hypotheses I put forward received pushback, mostly on the basis that everyone in the facility knows that the secondary generator is necessary, which is true. But knowing and believing are two different things, and the line that divides them is already fine enough without involving the anomalous into the equation. Using my theory of anomalous acoustics, which revolves around using anomalous effects and sound in a set of combined arrays to produce predictable and repeating phenomenon, I created a recording that is played on loop in the secondary generator room. The function of the recording is to create an environment where it sounds, it feels like a piece of heavy machinery is carrying out a deep and important task. The act of taking part in rituals gives power to faith, and in this case, functions as a ward against the negative effects of drawing power from a dimension that operates on psychic energy derived from abstract concepts such as fun, chaos, and whimsy. Once the recording was installed in the generator room, key staff were systematically cycled through the facility and given a tour of the generator, being read a speech that integrated the necessity of believing in the generator's ability to perform at acceptable levels, and then told to take in the generator as it operates, with focus given to how it feels and sounds. Within 2 weeks of this process, the generator was running with 15% increased efficiency, proving that my hypothesis had some strong legs to stand on. Working together with the site staff, who were also researching the issue, primarily researchers Wilkins, Starner, and Williams, we concluded that including an additional anomalous step would increase the efficacy of the dimensional sequencing process. After reviewing a list of available anomalies we were given clearance to use, we settled on 1133. The containment procedure is as follows. Item number, SCP-1133. Object class, safe. Special containment procedures. SCP-1133 is to be kept within a secure testing chamber at site redacted, equipped with one standard power socket. Samples of SCP-1133-X should be stored in an on-site bioresearch vault. Both should be guarded by a minimum of 1 armed personnel at all times in order to prevent unauthorized access. Description: SCP-1133 resembles an ordinary, hospital-standard intravenous fluid stand. Only the infusion pump displays any anomalous properties. The tubes, stand, power supply, and intravenous drip bags are entirely ordinary and can be replaced. With the exception of the tubes passing through the infusion pump, all openings on the device are fused shut, including the rear battery compartment, requiring that SCP-1133 be connected to a standard power socket at all times. All attempts at opening SCP-1133 have so far failed, as the casing has proved remarkably resilient, such that the force required to penetrate the casing would likely cause irreparable damage to its internal components. As a result, internal examination has been postponed until primary research is complete. The console of SCP-1133 possesses 9 buttons, not present on a normal infusion pump. The first 7 are labeled with a corresponding number, and the final 2 with the words extract and infuse, respectively. The remainder of SCP-1133's controls are non-functional. When supplied with power, SCP-1133 will display the message Select Operation Settings, at which point either extract or infuse must be selected, after which SCP-1133 will activate if it is connected to a living human subject. If SCP-1133 is connected to a cadaver or any non-human species, SCP-1133 will display the message Operation Failed and shut down. If the extract setting is selected, one of the number buttons must be selected. This will cause SCP-1133 to begin extracting a substance, hereafter known as SCP-1133-X, from the subject, corresponding to the number chosen. Selecting the infuse option will result in the pump functioning as would be expected, infusing the substance placed in the drip bags into the subject's bloodstream. Only SCP-1133-X can be infused in this way. The use of any other substance will result in the message Operation Failed. SCP-1133-X appears to be synthesized directly from the subject's bloodstream upon extraction, and breaks down almost immediately upon entering the blood during infusion, making it almost impossible to observe its impact on human physiology. However, both the infusion and extraction of SCP-1133-X produces equal and opposite changes in the behavior and morality of the subjects, which are easily observable. Subjects are not normally aware of or disturbed by these changes, even when the subject had prior knowledge of SCP-1133's effects. To date, 7 different varieties of SCP-1133-X have been recorded, each with a distinct color and effect, and each corresponding to a specific number on SCP-1133's console. Samples of SCP-1133-X have no observable effect on the human body if administered by any means other than SCP-1133's infusion function. All attempts to synthesize SCP-1133-X in laboratory conditions have so far failed. For detailed analysis of SCP-1133-X's chemical properties, please refer to document 1133-blank. There seems to be limits to the quality of each variety SCP-1133-X that can be extracted from any given subject, which seems to vary from individual to individual, depending on the personality of the subject. For example, subjects with a history of kleptomania seem to have larger natural reservoirs of SCP-1133-3 available for extraction, and requiring less SCP-1133-3 infusion to display more extreme symptoms. It is unknown whether an upper limit exists for the infusion of SCP-1133-X. Below is a list of the 7 known varieties and their effects. SCP-1133-1. Color, light green. Infusion effect. Increased appetite. Subjects infused with sufficient quantities of 1133-1 are unable to resist their compulsion to consume any form of food in the immediate area, including those normally repulsive to humans, such as rotten food, raw meat, and animal feed. Subjects will frequently become violent when denied food. Several D-class subjects infused with 1133-1 have died as a result of choking or, in extreme cases, of stomach ruptures caused by the sheer quantity consumed. In small amounts, 1133-1 infusion has proved to improve the symptoms of eating disorders such as anorexia. Extraction effect. Decreased appetite. Subjects display a reduced enthusiasm for food, often forgetting to eat even to the point of starvation, although they can typically be induced to eat without the application of force. 1133-2. Color red. Infusion effect. Heightened stress levels and aggressive behavior. Those infused with large quantities of SCP-1133-2 typically become dangerous and violent, often becoming hostile towards Foundation personnel. Following Incident 171 redacted, any experiments involving 1133-2 require an additional 2 armed security guards at all times. Extraction effect. Reduced aggression and increased docile behavior. When large amounts are removed, subjects will often refuse to defend themselves, even from violent assault. Given the potential of this process to make subjects more compliant, use of 1133-2 extraction in interrogations or pacification of troublesome personnel is being considered pending further testing. SCP-1133-3. Color yellow. Infusion effect. SCP-1133-3 appears to influence interest in material wealth. Subjects typically become obsessed with financial gain, often showing symptoms of kleptomania. Subjects exposed to high amounts will often become violently fixated on shiny objects, such as wristwatches or metal buttons. Extraction effect. Loss of interest in money and material wealth, generally becoming indifferent to material possessions as opposed to actively generous. Subjects will often show reduced understanding of money and financial issues, as well as reduced motivation for the completion of tasks with material rewards. SCP-1133-4. Color blue. Infusion effect. Increased egotism and self-confidence. Although small infusions can lead to beneficial increases in confidence, further amounts will likely lead to narcissism and vanity, often resulting in violent attacks on any personnel the subject perceives as insulting them. Extraction effect. Similar to SCP-1133-2, subjects become quieter and less assertive, although they will still defend themselves if faced with assault. Extraction of maximum quantity of SCP-1133-4 has resulted in attempted suicide in redacted percent of cases. SCP-1133-5. Color dark green. Infusion effect. Increased fixation on the possessions, achievements, and privileges of others, with subjects often coming to perceive all others as better off than themselves. This has frequently resulted in uncooperative and abusive behavior in subjects, although subjects are typically not violent, instead preferring acts of sabotage or indirect methods of inducing pain and distress in those around them. Extraction effect. Subjects disinterested in the possessions of those around them. 1133-5 extraction seems to have comparatively few detrimental effects on subjects, although there is still a high risk of psychological damage and data expunged in all cases. SCP-1133-6. Color brown. Infusion effect. Increased levels of general apathy and reduced energy, in some cases showing symptoms similar to those of moderate to severe narcolepsy. Those subjected to high enough levels of SCP-1133-6 enter a coma-like state, and so far no attempts bar the extraction of SCP-1133-6 have proved successful in recovery. Extraction effect. Increased energy levels, activity, and enthusiasm. In extreme cases, this can result in hyperactivity and symptoms comparable to attention deficit disorder, although subjects will more commonly suffer from insomnia and mental fatigue resulting from increased physical and mental activity. SCP-1133-7. Color purple. Infusion effect. Increased sexual drive. In extreme cases, this results in symptoms similar to clinical hypersexuality. Subjects have frequently resorted to violence in attempts to satisfy the resulting compulsions, which has made testing on the effects of 1133-7 particularly troublesome. Extraction effect. Reduced interest in sexual activity. Those having the maximum amount extracted typically become completely disinterested and in some cases repulsed by the idea of sexual intercourse. All right, now we can go back. Researcher Williams suggested that we infuse the workers stationed in the secondary generator room with 1133-6, then initiate extraction while giving them the tour. The inclusion of this process resulted in full generator efficiency within 3 days. I've submitted a request to have researcher Williams transferred to the Anomalous Acoustics Department pending approval. Hopefully the success of this project gives me more room to operate and puts some bigger and more experimental jobs on my desk. I'm going to append a non-anomalous version of the recordings we made for use in the generator room to this log. That ends transmission 1.